The night had settled heavily over Ashwood Lane, the narrow stretch of cracked asphalt lined with skeletal trees that seemed to lean inward, as if trying to keep a secret. At the very end of the lane stood the house, its Victorian frame towering against the cloud-choked sky, every window dark like a pair of watching eyes. People in town called it the Flesh House. No one lived there anymore. No one wanted to. But 3 college friends, emboldened by cheap beer and bravado, had convinced themselves it was just an old legend, a perfect place to prove they weren't afraid of anything. Jack pushed the rusted gate with his shoulder, its hinges shrieking in protest. The sound carried through the still night, echoing into the surrounding woods. Behind him, Dana clutched her phone with the flashlight app open, her knuckles white. Chris followed last, his laughter thin and forced, every note betraying the dread simmering beneath his grin. They moved toward the house, boots crunching over dead leaves and broken glass, the porch sagging under their weight. The doors stood slightly ajar, as though the house had been expecting them inside. The air was dense, thick with dust and something metallic that clung to their tongues. Their footsteps stirred layers of grime from the floorboards, each creak groaning like a buried voice trying to break free. Dana lifted her phone higher, its weak light spilling across peeling wallpaper, cobwebs trembling in the draft. She whispered, "Why does it feel like it's breathing in here?" No one answered. The living room looked abandoned for decades, yet there were stains on the wooden floor dark, irregular patches that seemed too deliberate to be water damage. Jack crouched, dragging his finger across one, bringing it to his nose. He recoiled instantly, gagging at the unmistakable stench of dried blood. Chris forced a chuckle. Probably just paint. Old houses have all kinds of weird crap. But his voice cracked halfway through, and none of them believed his words. They explored further, the silence amplifying every nervous breath. A broken picture frame lay in a corner, the glass shattered but the photograph beneath intact. It showed a family of 4, all smiling stiffly, their eyes slightly too dark, almost smudged. Dana stared at it longer than she should have, a chill tracing her spine. "They look wrong," she muttered. Jack snatched it up, shaking his head. "It's just an old photo. Stop creeping yourself out." But even he set it down quickly, avoiding the frozen gaze of the children in the picture. The staircase groaned as they climbed. Halfway up, Dana froze, shining her light beneath the steps. Something pale gleamed through the shadows. She crouched, and the others leaned closer. It was a human femur, jagged at one end, with bits of dried flesh still clinging stubbornly to the bone. Fresh blood glistened near the splintered tip, a bead slipping free and dripping onto the dust. Jack cursed, stumbling backward. "That's not fake. That's not fucking fake." Before they could react further, a droplet of thick red liquid splashed onto Chris's shoulder. He swiped at it and looked up. The ceiling above was cracked and stained, but worse than that, half a human face was embedded in the plaster, lips peeled back in a silent scream. One eye was gone, a black pit, but the other blinked once, sluggish and deliberate. Dana shrieked, dropping her phone. The beam of light skittered across the walls, catching glimpses of dark streaks and claw marks etched deep into the wood. The house groaned again, but this time it wasn't the sound of settling beams. It was deeper, like a stomach digesting something. The temperature plummeted. Dana retrieved her phone, hands shaking so badly the light wavered in every direction. Jack swallowed hard. "We should go, now, this is fucked." But the house didn't want them to leave. Every step toward the front door seemed to stretch, the hallway elongating, shadows bleeding into one another until they weren't sure which way they'd come from. The wallpaper pulsed faintly as if veins ran beneath it, carrying some dark lifeblood through the walls. Chris pressed his palm against it and recoiled. The wall was warm, Moist like the skin of something alive, they stumbled into a dining room, its long table covered with a moldy cloth. Beneath it, shapes bulged unnaturally. Jack yanked the cloth away and gagged. What sat on the table wasn't furniture, but remnants of bodies, decomposed to varying degrees, their torsos hacked open, ribs splayed like grotesque cages. A half-rotted hand slipped from the pile and landed on the floor with a wet thud. Its fingernails cracked and bloody. Chris backed into the wall, whispering, "We shouldn't have come. We shouldn't have come." Dana tugged at him, eyes wide with tears. But Jack stood frozen, staring toward a doorway at the far end of the room. From there came the faint clinking of chains, rhythmic and patient, like something waiting in the dark. The basement door. The smell hit them before they reached it, sour rot mixed with iron. The doorknob was sticky when Jack grasped it, leaving his palm slick and red. He gagged but pulled it open anyway. A rush of cold, foul air poured up, heavy with the stench of something long dead yet not at rest. The stairwell yawned into blackness. The chain sounds louder now, accompanied by something else, a wet dragging like flesh across stone. They stood there, suspended in fear. Dana clutched Jack's arm. "Please, don't go down there, please." But something in the darkness seemed to breathe, whispering in a low rasp they could barely make out. It wasn't a voice, not really, but it said something clear enough to chill their marrow. "You shouldn't have come." The foam light flickered, shadows stretching grotesquely along the stairwell walls. Chris took a shaky step forward, his curiosity outweighing the terror in his chest. The others followed, unwilling to let him face it alone. One by one, their shoes hit the rotting wood of the staircase, every creak echoing like a scream in the suffocating silence. The last thing they saw, before the light sputtered out, was a trail of smeared blood leading down, vanishing into the depths below. The darkness swallowed them whole, the whispers growing louder, closer, as though the house itself had drawn its first full breath in years. The darkness pressed in as they descended, so complete it felt like a living thing wrapping around their throats. Dana's phone light flickered once more, struggling against the suffocating void, casting erratic beams along the decaying walls. The staircase groaned beneath their weight, each step sticky, as though soaked in something that clung to their solace. The smell grew worse with every breath, an acidic tang of rot, coppery blood, and mold so thick it coated their tongues. Jack gagged, pulling his shirt over his mouth, but it did nothing to block the stench dot at the bottom. The beam revealed a basement that looked more like a slaughterhouse than part of a home. Rusted chains dangled from the ceiling, some ending in jagged hooks, each one slick with dried gore. Against one wall stood a table, no, not a table, a surgical altar, its surface covered in blackened stains. Beside it, jars lined the shelves, their cloudy liquid barely hiding what floated inside. Severed hands, a jawbone with teeth still clinging to the gums. A piece of intestine curled like a worm against the glass dot. Dana whimpered, covering her mouth as tears streaked her face. Chris inched closer, his light sweeping across the floor, where piles of bones were heaped haphazardly. Some were gnawed, teeth marks etched deep into the marrow. One skull still had strands of hair clinging to it, the eye sockets stuffed with something damp and fleshy. Jack whispered, "Jesus Christ, this isn't real. This can't be fucking real." The chains rattled again, not from the wind, there was none, but from movement deeper in the shadows. A wet sound followed, like meat being dragged across stone. Dana's light trembled as she turned toward it, and for a moment nothing appeared. Then the shadows shifted, and something stepped forward. It was human once, maybe? Now it was raw muscle and sinew stretched over bones, skin peeled away as though flayed alive. Blood dripped steadily from its jawless mouth, splattering onto the floor in thick clots. Its ribs jutted out like blades, and its eyes were pits of glistening black, yet still burning with hunger. The figure shuddered as it moved, tendons snapping taut, and then it let out a low groan that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. Dana screamed, stumbling backward into Jack. Chris froze, his flashlight trembling as the creature advanced. Its claws, because there was no better word for the bone-sharp extensions of its fingers, scraped the stone floor, leaving trails of sparks. The air thickened with heat and stench, and the whispers from the walls grew frantic, a chorus of voices begging, warning. Crying out, Jack grabbed Dana's arm and yanked her toward the stairs, but the door above slammed shut with a thunderous crack. The sound echoed like gunfire, leaving only the suffocating basement and the monster before them. "We're trapped," Jack gasped. The creature lunged impossibly fast. It swiped at Chris, slicing his shoulder open with such force that strips of flesh peeled away and flopped to the floor. Blood sprayed across the walls, soaking into the scratches already carved there. Chris screamed, clutching his wound, stumbling against the surgical table. His palm pressed onto the rusted surface, and when he pulled it back, chunks of skin ripped away with it. Dana shrieked and tried to drag him back, but the monster caught her hair and slammed her against the wall. The plaster cracked and she crumpled, dazed, blood dripping down her forehead. Jack swung wildly with a piece of broken wood, smacking it against the creature's ribs. It barely flinched. Instead, it twisted toward him, its black eyes locking onto his, and let out a guttural moan that sprayed blood and saliva. The walls began to pulse again, veins of red crawling outward, the whole basement throbbing like the inside of a body. From the cracks seeped more fluid, crimson streams trickling down to pool around their feet. The whispers rose into screams, and for a moment, Jack could swear he saw faces pressing against the walls, mouths open in eternal agony. The creature grabbed Chris by the throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. Chris kicked and clawed, his feet scraping against the table, but the thing slammed him down across the altar. The chains dropped from the ceiling, coiling around his wrists and ankles, tightening until bone snapped. Chris screamed, the sound muffled as the creature pressed its claws into his chest, peeling it open with a wet rip. His ribs cracked, blood geysering across the table, splattering Jack and Dana. The monster leaned down, its tongue thick, red tendons sliding into the cavity as it fed. Jack grabbed Dana, pulling her toward the corner. She was sobbing uncontrollably, covered in blood not her own. "We have to get out. We have to," he hissed, his own voice shaking. But the basement seemed to stretch again, every corner endless, every door vanishing. The only way was deeper, into the dark that whispered and begged them closer. The monster looked up from Chris, his body twitching faintly on the table, chest hollowed. Its eyes found Jack and Dana. With a sickening crack, it unhinged its jaw, skinless muscles snapping apart, mouth opening wider than humanly possible. The sound that followed wasn't a scream or a roar. It was laughter, layered with the voices of everyone who had ever died there. Jack shoved Dana toward the stairs again, pounding on the door with both fists. His skin burned where the blood had touched it, as though the house itself was marking him. Dana clawed at the wood, nails snapping, tears streaking her blood-stained face. Behind them, the chains rattled again. The monster was coming. It dragged Chris's body across the floor, leaving a smeared trail of gore, then tossed him aside like waste. His head struck the stone, and his eyes rolled lifeless. Dana screamed again, the sound so raw it cut through the cacophony of whispers. The chains shot from the ceiling like living things, lashing around her ankles, yanking her backward. She hit the floor hard, nails clawing grooves in the wood as she was pulled toward the altar. Jack grabbed her hands, trying to pull her free. Their eyes locked for one agonizing second before her grip slipped. The chains tore her from him, dragging her into the monster's embrace. Her screams filled the basement as the creature bent over her, its claws digging into her stomach, tearing upward until her insides spilled across the table and steaming ropes. Jack's vision blurred with tears and horror. He ran. Blind, desperate, he sprinted into the darkness. The whispers guided him, twisting and cruel. Somehow, impossibly, he stumbled through a doorway that hadn't been there before. He burst into the night air, collapsing onto the cool grass, heaving, covered in blood that wasn't his. Behind him, the house loomed silently, its windows black, its frame still. Jack sobbed, pressing his face into the dirt, clutching the earth like it might anchor him. For a moment, he thought he'd escaped. But when he raised his hand, he saw fingerprints smeared in fresh blood across his skin. They weren't his own. The house had touched him, claimed him, and he understood now what the whispers meant. The diary he'd glimpsed inside flashed through his memory. Its final words etched permanently into his brain. The house always takes one more.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.